So these are questions that came from you?
Chat with Dr. Dale.
That's right.
Glad
Yes,
my
sir.
wife isn't here.
So, Dr. Dale, why did you become a pastor? As a young leader, you inspire me also, says Uncle Luke says, go White Sox. And for fun, how often did you sleep in the cabin?
I've never slept in the cabin. And after, let's say it this way, my wife has had 7 happy years of marriage out of 46. But one of the things I've discovered is that our spouses are more wonderful than I can say. They uphold the prophet's arms. And frankly, on campus, Diane, who is called Oma, I'm Opa, she has more clout than I do. I always wanted to be a pastor. From little on, there were pastors on the Bauer side of the family, okay? The Meyers were farmers and milkmen, and the Bauers were either pastors or car salesmen. So I'm a 5th generation pastor, but not in a straight line. I always did. And I think some of that is just psychological. Okay. Because a lot of us get into this work because there's something in our psychological makeup that leads us into ministry. But that also can be sanctified.
All right, thank you. All right, here's another one. What are the questions that people are asking in 2019 that are different from the ones they asked in 1950?
We had a meeting a couple of years ago with the Council of Presidents. These are the district presidents or bishops of our regional judicatories. And we were revising our residential curriculum. And one of the professors said, we need theology for the 21st century. And one of those district presidents / bishops said, what's wrong with the theology of the 20th century? And the answer is, and I endorse this answer, for example, people did not question the existence of God in the 20th century. It may not have been the most important thing in their lives, but that was accepted. Today, you have to begin to make a case that there is a creator. Okay. And one of the things today, and we've gotten in trouble on this, if someone is not a member of the church and operates with the stereotypes of how we Christians are, how do you get engaged with them about God? I think science. Isaiah 40:26, lift up your eyes on high and see who created these. So when we bring this up, at least in the circles where I run, people think, oh yeah, they're gonna accommodate themselves to evolution. No. Look at our expanding nature of cosmology. My God, did you make all of this? So I think those are two things, the existence of God and a more active engagement, not a capitulation, but a more active engagement with science.
I understand.
And there are many more. Identity issues, all these sexual identity issues, man, I don't know how to respond to that. The kids can deal with that better. But there's just a whole raft of things. And one of the things, if I may, Blanche, mm-hmm. I am convinced that 20 or 30 years from now, the seminaries, at least in our context, the seminaries cannot continue to exist if they just think that they are there to produce pastors. We have to produce continuing education resources, like about bioethical challenges, about creation and science engagement. We have to be a resource to the church, to pastors and lay people, and also our graduate schools. Our graduate schools are open to any denomination. Undergrad is LCMS, but continuing ed and graduate schools are open to any denomination. And so we have to engage, and there's a host of those things. So I'm rambling a little bit, but
sure.
It's a rich time to be in theology for the sake of people.
All right, okay, good. If hearing you are a sinner and Jesus died for you doesn't do it from the pulpit, What is a message that moves you and congregants? What is a message that moves you and congregants?
If I'm understanding the question, I want to hear that Jesus died and rose again for me.
Yes.
You know, I don't have to take the mandatory bus trip to Calvary in every sermon or Bible class that I hear. I want to finish a sermon, whether I preach it, and boy, I've preached some bummers, or hear it, that shows that I need the grace of God in Jesus.
Right.
So it's theology, but theology for hands-on people. You know, Augie Meneke was first vice president of the LCMS years ago, passed on, and he talked about his 3-year-old grandchild that was going to go, for some reason, going to go down into the basement, and it was dark. And the grandchild says, "Jesus, you better hold my hand, it's dark down there." I want Jesus with his skin on.
All right. Okay, excellent. All right, this next one is kind of a themed, because we had so many questions that were similar, and the theme is sin and damnation that you talked about in your message. And so there's a couple of things, so bear with me. One of the questions in this category says, what's the best way to use the law in today's context? Another point to ask about is, sin is not what's on the mind of the unchurched, meaning of life, stress, etc. is. Are these the hot issues? And the last point under this theme is preaching sin without driving away. So how do you address all of that under this kind of thing of?
Well, I can remember the first one. You'll have to help me plan.
Sure.
The other
That's
two.
fine.
Yeah, what did I come into this room for? Diane and I are starting to ask that question more and more. The law crushes us, okay? But the law also explains the dynamics that are going on in our lives. And at least in the circles where I move, we have done a lousy job of that. We have been ham-handed with the law. The law says you're a sinner, you're condemned, Well, the law also explains the dynamics that are going on in our regenerate or unregenerate lives. So, for example, in a text that I use is Martin Chemnitz's Loci Theologici. And what he writes on the Ten Commandments is awesome. If you plow through it, it's not easy reading, and there's no pictures, but in on the fifth commandment, he talks about what I was talking about, these urges and impulses, and how you're supposed to deal with that. I don't see us using. I think the problem with our gospel preaching is that we're not sophisticated enough with our law understanding and preaching.
Okay, so another part of that then is sin's not always what's on the mind of the unchurched, more of the things that they face in their day-to-day, like stresses and things like that. So how do you respond to that?
This is, I didn't get into this because of running out of time. When President Rast and I went to Ethiopia last March, the former president of the Mekane Yesus Church told us that they operate with 2 wings, like a plane. One wing is evangelization. The other wing is human care, social ministry. A friend of mine from the ABS, Gene Habecker, said, "Don't tell me what a friend I have in Jesus until I see what a friend I have in you." More than any time in my lifetime, the church has to be in the community.
Right.
Meeting people with whatever the need happens to be. And I wouldn't even think about this as being pre-evangelism. This is just love. Love has no ulterior motive. Can I tell you a story?
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to say that it's so important what you're talking about, relationship and relationship building, and that's what your point is. Go ahead. I'd like to hear that story.
One of these great Siebert trips that I took with students, are we hearing that? Immersion experience was to Lake Point Church in Hot Springs. Now, Lake Point Church is aimed at gathering people who are in no way going to go to your traditional St. John, St. Matthew, St. Mattress Lutheran Church. It's a church that I would not be comfortable at. I'm a traditional page 5 kind of guy, okay? So in the afternoon, the students were taken to the bus station, the old bus station, and they were handing out food. And one of the members comes up to me. I'm just watching how our students are interacting. And she says, "See that girl? Like a 20-something-year-old girl? She was being counseled by one of the church members to get out of prostitution."
Oh.
And I was told that, and by the way, this counseling was, they weren't just, fly by night. Whatever psychological resources they had or referred to, it was responsible. And this member was saying, "You've got to get out of that life." But this young girl was scared of what would be done to her. Mm-hmm. And so I'm thinking, wow, how does the church answer this? I don't think you deal with this by arguing about closed communion.
All right.
And I'm not making a statement on that. Okay? Or the inerrancy of Scripture. Okay. How do you deal with that theologically? So an hour or two later, this young woman comes back, and she's got a guy with her that's dressed up like this. And I said to that woman, I said, "Well, who's that with her?" "That's her pimp." And she is scared to death of leaving him. And so this church is trying, this was a couple of years ago, to reach her on a human need basis. But I think it's what Habecker said, "Don't tell me what a friend I have in Jesus until I see what a friend I have in you." Yeah. It's love. It's not pre-evangelism.
All right. That's a good answer. Okay, let me ask another. How do you encourage people to come to church every week without becoming consumerist by trying to prove that church is better than the alternatives? How do you go about doing that without coming across as consumerism?
Yeah, that's one of the problems that we have, especially in some of the big churches across the board. I'm not talking Lutheran, they're consumers. We've got something that you want to consume. I think one of them is meeting people. The pastor and others should be active in the community and let it be known you're a church person, but don't beat them over the head about coming to church.
Good.
When they do come, meet them at a personal level, get to know them, welcome them, don't badger them. And if the message and the culture of that congregation is welcoming, they may very well come back, but you can get them in church one time. Getting them to come back, that's the real trick.
Yes.
It's hands-on. It's hands-on people,
That's
know?
Right.
That's a great quote in the quotations. There's a quotation from Philip Yancey, and I picked it up in David Kinnaman's book, Unchristian. Jesus loved to hang out with sinners because they were easier to deal with than the Lutherans, or the Pharisees, I mean.
So it sounds like, Dr. Dill, you're talking about meeting people where they are.
Exactly. But
Good.
Don't leave them there.
But don't leave them there. Okay. Speak a little bit about one's faith to witness without pushing their religion onto others. You might have touched on that a little bit. Speak about how one should share their faith to witness without pushing religion on others.
Yeah, to their credit, people outside the church see the hypocrisy of religion. And our students, at least at our seminary, see some of the hypocrisy of the way we have done church in the past. I think 1 Peter 3:15 Always be ready to give an account for the hope that is in you, but do it with gentleness and meekness, patience. First Peter has only 2 verses that talk about verbal witness. There are 105 verses in 1 Peter, and only 2 of them. 2:9, you are a royal priesthood, to declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And then 3:15, which says, if you get in a situation where you maybe are on trial or being pushed for your faith, then give an account, a rational account for the hope that is in you. The rest of Peter, 1 Peter, is be out there with the people. Don't buy into their ways necessarily, but don't retreat. Don't become, a sect. Be out there. So, what was the question?
Well, you kind of answered it. It was about how can I share with others about my faith, about witnessing without pushing religion.
Just be out there. Just be genuine. Be transparent.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
Just be with people.
Living a good life has become a substitute. So this living a good life has become a substitute for a deeper relationship with God through Christ. Is that true or false?
True.
And how can the congregation address this?
So I'm not a parish pastor. You got a lot of parish pastors. On the plane, I just picked up George Will's mammoth new book, The Conservative Sensibility. And he talks about some of the things that I've talked about. Although Will's grandfather was a Lutheran minister, I'm guessing LCA in the East. And then Will's father and mother were atheists in Champaign-Urbana, and Will describes himself as an amiable atheist. But it's awesome book. I mean, this guy, however it is when you read a smart book, like what a dumb guy I am. But he talks about individualism in the history of especially the United States. He takes it back to Luther, but especially at the founding, and he said that has a tendency to go to hedonism. It's all about me. It's not about you. I don't owe you anything.
Yeah.
As long as I have my desires met.
Sure.
And he talks about that. People do not understand what sacrifice is. And the church's sacrifice. Last year was the 500th anniversary of the Heidelberg Disputation. Wow. I read that and read Ferdy's book. The church at large today does not understand the theology of the cross. Yeah, Jesus died for my sins. Okay. No, the theology of the cross is that you're out there with this young woman who's being pimped, and you may not be able to make it better. We think, well, yeah, we can make it better by getting him into church. No. Thesis 28 of the Heidelberg Disputation says, and I'm not quoting it exactly, but I'll paraphrase it. Human beings love what we find lovable. God's love makes ugly things lovable.
All right.
So I just don't, we pay lip service to the theology of the cross, but I'm not sure that we get it. I'm not sure. So, so maybe that young woman's still in prostitution today. I don't know. That's not the issue. The issue is, are we meeting her with the love of Jesus? Here's a great story. That's about a prostitute too. They're starting to wonder about me.
Well, I'm going to have you finish this last thought because we're almost out of time, so that could be your last thought, if you don't mind.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
So a graduate of our seminary was a pastor in Chicago at 50, 60 streets south, bad neighborhood. And he and an elder were in the habit of doing prayer walks around the neighborhood. And I've never done that, but I guess you walk around and you just pray for the neighborhood. A woman comes up and they start talking with her.
Okay.
And the pastor says, our church has a prayer book that I'd like to share with you. It's called The Portals of Prayer. She said, no. I don't need that. No. You've got to have this Portals of Prayer book. You'll find it helpful. She says, I've got it. And she opened up her purse and pulled out the current Portals of Prayer. This is a prostitute. I can't enter into her life. All I can do is try and whether it's her life or anybody else's life, try and hear the story.
So true.
That's all I can do. I can't badger a person to come into church. Think of this,
That's right.
think of the struggle.
That's right.
She reads her Portals of Prayer every day, and yet she has this ungodly lifestyle. She needs the freedom of Christ, the liberation. For freedom Christ has set you free. Do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. So she may have a soul that is free, but she's got to somehow be able to break out of this bondage that not only she's in, we're all in it some way or other.
Yes,
So
yes.
thank
Very
you,
good.
Blanche.
Thank you very much.